Hello, people.
Southern Ohio's rural counties are perfect for outdoor recreation. But the calm of this quiet community was shattered in 1989 when a sniper gunned down an outdoorsman without reason. It was only the first in a string of random, terrifying murders. Hiding in the distance, behind a high-powered rifle, a madman was hunting humans along Ohio's county roads.
Starting in the spring of 1989, a madman prowled the woods and fields of rural Ohio. He was a hunter. A high-powered rifle was his weapon of choice. Joggers and fishermen were his quarry. The hunter roamed far, struck at random, and left no clues. He was as elusive as he was lethal. Investigators knew he had to be stopped, but no one knew how. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. Most murderers have a connection to their victims and a motive for their crime, but not a serial killer. His victims were randomly chosen to fulfill an uncontrollable need to kill. Often he leads an ordinary life, his family and friends unaware of his homicidal passions. But serial killers establish profiles, as distinct as fingerprints, and when a match is made, it is only a matter of time before they are caught.
The rural counties of southern Ohio are hilly, rocky, and wide open. A quiet place for coal miners, factory workers, and farmers. the kind of place where people leave doors unlocked and where violent crime is almost unheard of. On April 1st, 1989, 35-year-old Donald Welling did what he frequently did on Saturdays. He went jogging along the back roads of Tuscarawas County. His quiet morning run ended with a single shot. The rifle bullet ripped through Welling's heart, killing him instantly. Local authorities could find no motive and not a shred of evidence. The rifle was never found. November 10th, 1990, another Saturday morning, 19 months later. 21-year-old Jamie Paxton of Bannock, Ohio, rose early to go bow hunting. Leaving his crossbow in the car, he took a walk through the tall grass off State Route 9. Paxton was alone and unarmed. He didn't notice the red pickup truck that stopped a short distance away. The gunman was quiet and careful. Jamie Paxton was shot 3 times by a high-powered rifle. There were no witnesses. The killing horrified a quiet community that considered murder to be a problem for big cities. Hunting accidents are not uncommon in southern Ohio, but Belmont County Sheriff Tom McCourt knew right away that this wasn't a hunting accident.
We saw more than one wound. We knew that it could not be an accident. That an accidental death, hunting accident, is called a one-shot. Plus, we saw it was a bullet wound instead of something from an arrow, and gun season was not in yet.
Sheriff Tom McCourt's jurisdiction is large geographically, but the community is closely knit. There, people work hard, and everyone seems to know everyone. McCourt even knew Jamie Paxton. What he didn't know was who killed him.
Hello, everybody.
The gunman had left no clues.
We checked the area for spent, empty cartridge cases, or tire tracks, or anything in that area of where we thought the shot came from. We also checked the area around the body looking for the spent projectiles that had passed through the body. We even took metal detectors in looking for the projectiles. At that time, we were unable to find anything. Spotted Marina, and
After interviewing Jamie Paxton's friends, family, and acquaintances, they were unable to find anyone with a motive to kill him.
everyone in the area knew Jamie Paxton. No one that we knew of was able, even to this day, have ever found anyone who disliked the young man.
Sheriff McCourt had an apparently random killing of a popular young man with no history of trouble. A seemingly unsolvable murder with no physical evidence and no witnesses. Not even a plausible theory about what happened.
I think about it.
After her son's death, Jean Paxton's grief impelled her to action. She began composing letters to a local paper, the Martins Ferry Times-Leader, designed to draw out the killer.
There was just every time I would sit down to write a letter, I would say a prayer. And I would say, please God, just give me the words to get to the person that killed my son.
The letters were at once stern and passionate. To the murderer of my son Jamie, she wrote, Would it be easier for you if I wrote words of hate? I can't because I don't feel you. I feel deep sorrow at losing my son. You took a light from my life last November and left me with many days of darkness. Have you thought of your own death? It'll happen. Unless you confess your sin and ask for God's forgiveness, you will face the fire and fury of hell for your own death. If the killer were reading Gene Paxton's letters, he seemed unaffected by them. On November 28th, 1990, just 18 days after Paxton's murder, 30-year-old Kevin Loring was on a hunting trip in Muskegon County, Ohio, some 40 miles from where Jamie Paxton was killed. While his friends finished eating lunch, Kevin decided to get a head start. Walking across a field in search of game, Loring himself became prey, unknowingly moving into the sights of the gunman. Loring was killed by a single gunshot wound to the head. The killer had taken care to commit his murders in different counties to slow an investigation that would have to take place over hundreds of rural miles. The result? Investigators in Muskegon County were unaware of the other sniper victims in nearby counties. They decided that Loring's death was probably a hunting accident. Gene Paxton never gave up. She kept writing throughout 1991, determined to draw out Jamie's killer.
And I always felt if I could get my letters into the hands of the person that killed my son, I felt that I could get a response from them.
She turned out to be right. I am the murderer of Jamie Paxton, the typewritten letter read. Jamie Paxton was a complete stranger to me. I never saw him before in my life, and he never said a word to me that Saturday. Paxton was killed because of an irresistible compulsion that has taken over my life. I knew when I left my house that day that someone would die by my hand. I just didn't know who or where. I'm an average-looking person with a family, a job, and home, just like yourself. Something in my head causes me to turn into a merciless killer with no conscience. The letter arrived at the Martins Ferry Times-Leader a few days before the one-year anniversary of Jamie's death. The letter described the Paxton murder in chilling detail. I was very drunk, and a voice in my head said, "Do it." I stopped my car behind Jamie's and got out. Jamie started walking very slowly down the hill toward the road. I raised my rifle to my shoulder and lined him up in the sights. I took at least 5 seconds to take careful aim. My first shot was off a little bit, but hit him in the right chest. He groaned and went down. I wanted to make sure he was finished, so I fired a second shot aimed halfway between his hip and shoulder while he was prone on the ground. I jerked the shot and hit him in the knee.
Hello, Nicole, my dear sister.
He never moved again. 5 minutes after I shot Paxton, I was drinking a beer and had blacked out all thoughts of what I had just done out of my mind. I thought no more of shooting Paxton than shooting a bottle at the gun. I know you hate my guts, and rightfully so. I think about Jamie every hour of the day, as I'm sure you do. Sheriff McCourt, the letter was a beginning, evidence that might lead to a murder. But he needed more. The typewriter used to write the letter, a gun. While investigators searched, the killer continued his own hunting. Saturday, March 14th, 1992. Claude Hawkins got off his midnight shift at the Pittsburgh Plate and Glass Company about sunup. It was a good time to fish, and Hawkins went straight to a favorite spot on the river below Wills Creek Dam.
Oh, I'm up there and say loving you. Sexy NC in the house.
Hawkins had a wife and 4 children. Another outdoorsman had been killed while alone. But this one took place on federal property. The FBI stepped in. The FBI joined the hunt for the roadside sniper who just killed his latest victim on federal property. Investigators from the 3 counties involved, along with the
What
FBI
I know.
and the Ohio Division of Wildlife, formed a task force. It didn't take long to realize how few clues they had. In each case, the killer had no contact with the victim, no rifling of pockets, no robbery. Shell casings had been carefully removed, and the victim's cars were untouched. Special Agent Harry Trombitis was stationed at the FBI's Columbus, Ohio field office.
What we did know is that Mr. Hawkins died from a gunshot, and usually you would find some type of a shell casing in the area, and I remember looking very hard at metal detectors and hands and knees for any shell casings in that, and none were ever found. And so that was something that,
Hi,
if in fact we
Rocket.
had somebody who was evidence conscious enough to pick up the shell casing after they shot and killed somebody, we were dealing with a different brand of person here.
It's not a freaking buy from the freaking store and freaking. Oh my god, it's not a brand.
The multi-jurisdictional task
It's a
force
freaking
concluded
killer,
that
for
the death
God's
of Kitten
sake.
Loring, first ruled accidental, was actually a homicide.
Frustrates me when they say things like that.
Reviewing the 4 murders, the investigative team saw plenty in common. Outdoorsmen, hunters, fishermen, and joggers, alone in a rural setting, all shot with a high-powered rifle. All but one of the murders occurred on a weekend, and the killer was careful enough to leave no evidence. It was more clear than ever that a single individual was responsible.
Oh well, the weekend
The task
is
force was on the trail
always
of a serial
quick.
killer.
They go.
As they began to mobilize, the killer struck again.
I know we can capture this person. I know we can.
10 days after the task force meeting on April 5th, 1992, 44-year-old
And how the
steelworker Gary Bradley left his home in neighboring West Virginia to go pond fishing in Noble County.
You think you broke your thumb?
Bradley's wife and 3 children would never see him alive again.
No,
The task
don't want
force
to
had
have
another
that.
murder. The road sniper had to be stopped. The task force wanted to learn more about the personality of the sniper. They asked the FBI to draw up a psychological profile of the serial killer. Such an outline would be invaluable in tracking him down. Major Dane Shryock of the Coshocton County Sheriff's Office headed the task force.
Right after we had initially made an assessment that maybe these things might be linked, the Columbus FBI office set up a meeting to have the behavioral science unit to come to Columbus, Ohio, and actually sit down and talk with the investigators of these 5 counties of the homicides.
The FBI's Behavioral Science Unit in Quantico, Virginia, can accurately sketch personality profiles of individuals from sparse clues. Larry Ankrum is a member of the Behavioral Science Unit assigned to the road sniper case. He studied all the available evidence, the investigative reports of the 5 murders, and especially the letter that the killer had written to Gene Paxton.
When I came back to Quantico and reviewed these cases more in detail, and I came out with a formal profile. We were probably looking for a white male. We were looking for someone that was intelligent, someone who was an outdoorsman himself, someone that wouldn't look out of place in the woods, someone that was probably responding to some significant event in his life that was going wrong at that particular time. One of the things that was apparent that there was a sniper-type mentality here that we were dealing with, someone that didn't want
stay where you are.
confrontation, someone that was doing things from afar. And this is something that we see many times with our arsonists.
Just telling Smudgy
We
to
ought to be
stay
looking
where
at
she
some
was.
different types of activities that he might be
I
involved
didn't.
in,
I
such
thought I
as
heard
business
him
type
coming
of
downstairs.
things,
Got there, they
shooting
give her a
out,
food.
shooting out tires of
Fucking
cars,
door.
cruelty to animals, arson fires.
Fuck's sake.
Ankrum believed that the violence was triggered by stress and fueled by hunger.
That top
The
cat.
task force now had a psychological sketch of the roadside sniper.
Dumbass patio doors.
And they had his letter. FBI forensic
down.
scientists studied the letter intensely. They found distinguishing features in the typeface. If they could find the type that was written on, it would be easy to link the confessional letter to the owner, and thus link the murder to the murderer. They had to hurry. The sniper was still out there. On July 21st, 1992, 2 hunters in a state park in Muskegon County came face to face.
Doing, folks. There we go. Hi, Rocket. Fire and see.
As they moved through the brush, one of them noticed something terrifying. A nearby figure with a gun pointed right at him. They called out to him, and the man scurried away to a red pickup truck. It happened too quickly
You
for
cold?
the hunters to get a good look at the man or the vehicle's tag numbers.
Oh, he's getting a bit cold.
Bewildered,
Fire?
they
Oh,
called
yeah,
local
fucking
police
is cold.
who alerted the task force.
My computer just had a complete meltdown. Fucking
Throughout
switched itself
1992,
off. It got
desperate
too
to
hot.
catch a man still ready to kill.
I think I need to tighten up the cooler.
And cleared more than 100 suspects.
Off me. Pervert.
By August 1992, after
touching
3
me.
years, the investigation had hit a dead end.
Oh, you're all well.
The task force was badly in need of information and decided to go public.
It is in the opinion of this multi-agency task force.
They held a press conference and issued a press release detailing the FBI profile of the man.
Oh, I'm always there, you know me.
Anyone with
Wanking away in the bush.
The FBI made this press release, and it was done at one time, mass, and it got everybody. 6 o'clock news. I mean, everybody was showing this case. and the phone started ringing instantly.
One of those calls
Yeah, at least we got got lawns cut today. Very nice job as well.
Thank you.
And the strimmer was bust, wasn't it?
And you fixed it.
And I repaired it.
Just need to get the wire
you know, I'm
from.
alive. That's why I'm married to a crazy woman. Still alive every day.
Investigators had a name and someone willing to talk. A task force member arranged to meet Richard Fry at a rest stop on Route 76.
Just got to work on the back lawn.
There, Fry talked about his old
Just got the back lawn to do. And I need to order some steel cable ties.
He used to drive around
Oh,
Galway,
strimmer's working.
shooting road signs and small animals.
I need to buy an edging spade as well.
But Fry eventually found Dillon too eccentric and violent for his taste. Obsessed with serial killers like Ted Bundy, Dillon had taken to killing family pets and cattle and setting random fires. Fry got married and for most of the 1980s forgot about his strange friend. But in 1989, Fry ran into Thomas Dillon at a gun show in Cleveland.
Tom?
We love you, NC.
Dillon invited
To
him to ride
bits.
along with him again, just like in the old days.
Love you loads. I'm Rocket. I love you
Old
loads
friendships
too.
die hard. And Richard Fry
And there
again
go
found himself
my
riding
sister,
the back
there
roads
go.
of rural Ohio,
That
drinking beer and shooting road signs.
post I put up,
But Dillon had deteriorated.
that's from my
Fry's
close
friend.
friends.
Dillon asked whether Fry thought Dillon had ever killed anyone.
There's no other type in the world that could be crazy friends.
You think I could ever kill anybody?
But they're just being themselves.
You know, like you said, we go way back. I mean,
He discussed how to get away with random killings, including the tactic of killing in different counties to thwart investigators.
killing in separate counties. They were connected. And being at random, they'd have no clues whatsoever. Your average guy.
Fry said that when he read the press release, he immediately thought of Tom Dillon. He gave a description of Dillon, including the vehicle he drove, a red pickup truck, just like the one spotted by the hunters. Lieutenant Walt Wilson of the Tuscarawas County Sheriff's Office was a task force member. His job was to follow up on leads and tips, which were coming much more frequently as press coverage of the case increased. He decided Tom Dillon fit the FBI profile and needed to be investigated.
I began to follow up on the information that Mr. Fry had given us. I went to Tom Dillon's workplace in the city of Canton.
Dillon had been employed for a dozen years as a draftsman at the Canton, Ohio Waterworks. Wilson obtained Thomas Dillon's work schedules to compare Dillon's days off with the dates and times of the murders. The purpose was to eliminate Dillon as a suspect. But he couldn't. He found that Dillon didn't work weekends, when most of the incidents occurred. But that didn't prove much. However, 2 weekdays Dillon took off from work caught Wilson's attention. July 21st, 1992, the day the hunters saw a man point a rifle at them, and November 28th, 1990, the day Kevin Lyne was killed. Dillon could be the one. As the other members of the task force followed up on hundreds of leads, Detective Wilson began surveillance on Thomas Dillon. Maybe Dillon would return to a crime scene or lead investigators to more clues. The surveillance began in October 1992. Detective Wilson followed Tom Dillon on his weekend excursion, driving the back roads of southern Ohio.
Typically, a day would start around 7 in the morning on Tom's days off, the weekends usually. And he would leave his home, and sometimes he would stop at a convenience store and buy some beer, and then he would go south of his home into other counties, just driving all the back remote roadways.
On October 10th, 1992, while tailing Dillon, Wilson briefly lost track of the suspect's vehicle. As Wilson crept around a corner, he came face to face with Thomas Dillon. His cover possibly blown, his case in jeopardy, Wilson had to think fast.
I waved at him, and he waved at me, and we kept on going. He
And
stopped
I
at the
love
end of
you
the drive
too,
to see if
Lucy.
I was going to stay there or not.
Wilson couldn't risk being identified. He let Dillon drive away.
My big concern was I hope he doesn't stop and ask me what I'm doing on that property because I had all of my gear laying in the car with me.
Coming.
A few days later, Larry Oler of Barnhill, Ohio, was hunting about 150 miles off the road in Tuscarawas County.
Oh my god. That is too funny.
Through the trees, he saw a Scottish white male. The man lifted a rifle. Oler was unhurt and watched in terror as the truck sped away. Although Oler's description of his assailant resembled Dillon, he was unable to make a
Oh
positive
no, no, no. I
The task force
honestly,
realized
I
that
want to
Thomas
have a
Dillon was the
go
most
and
likely
see.
suspect. Surveillance of him would have to be beefed up.
No way,
Throughout
that is
October and
awesome.
November of 1992, the FBI coordinated a massive air and ground surveillance. Dillon was observed shooting road signs and busting car windows with rocks, exactly the sort of petty vandalism outlined in the FBI profile. But if they arrested Dillon for vandalism, they might never gather enough evidence to arrest him for the murders. It is difficult to tail someone on an empty rural road in broad daylight. The stakes were high. If Dillon tried another shooting and the FBI weren't in the right spot, they could have another murder. If they crowded Dillon too much, they might be found out, and Dillon would slip into hiding. The ground surveillance had to be well off of Dillon. Agent Trombitis and Captain Schreiber
Well,
relied on the air surveillance.
if you will come down here for a minute.
They would move in if something happened. One day, the surveillance team faced its worst fear. Trombitis and Shryock were far behind Dillon when the air surveillance called out an alert. Up ahead of Dillon, on the road, was the classic profile of a road sniper victim. A jogger, female this time, alone, in a rural setting. If Thomas Dillon were indeed the gunman, this jogger may be irresistible bait. Trombitis and Shryock got nervous. Hoping for the best, they sped forward. Dillon continued too, right toward the jogger. Driving at top speed, Trombitis and Shryock frantically crawled to the agents in the plane. Where is he? Is he stopped? The airplane reported back. Dillon is approaching. There is no one nearby. The agent's car hurtled forward. A call from the air. Dillon is pulling up alongside the jogger. The agents held their breath. He passed it without incident. The feeling of relief lasted only moments. The airplane radioed that Dillon had taken a right turn into a smaller road. The aerial unit stayed on it, instructing Trombitis and Shryock where to turn. Then a second right turn. Could he be circling back? They called to the airplane. Is the jogger still there? Dillon continued to make right turns until he was back on the road the jogger had been on. His U-turn justified the agent's fear. He was going back forward. Where is the jogger? Trumbitis yelled into his radio. Cannot see the jogger, came the reply. But the agents knew she had to be somewhere ahead of Dillon. If he came upon her again, they were sure he would kill her. The air unit called in that Dillon had stopped his truck and had gotten out. He had something shiny in his hand. Would he kill her right under their noses? The jogger couldn't be seen from the air, but that didn't mean she wasn't there. The agents in the car heard shots and feared that Dillon had struck again while under their surveillance.
If you weren't freaking online, how are you freaking typing, you num-num?
The jogger had turned off the road. She was safe, unaware of her close encounter with Thomas Dillon. The cat-and-mouse game with Thomas Dillon began to wear on the task force members.
A lot of pressure. I mean, you're wondering whether this guy today is going to go out and kill somebody. You aren't going to be able to stop it. You know that he's probably the one that is responsible for killing other people. You're working 14, 16 hours a day. You're living out of a car. You're drinking coffee like policemen, you know. You aren't eating right, and the stress is tremendous.
But the net continued to tighten around the suspect. The murderer, in his letter to the newspaper, had admitted being bothered by the Paxton murder and visiting his grave. Investigators returned to video footage of Jamie Paxton's grave, recorded November 10th, 1991, the first anniversary of Jamie's murder. Many people paid their respects that day, but curiosity rather than respect was the agenda of one visitor photographed, Thomas Dillon. Investigators immediately recognized the man they had been tailing. Surely he was the sniper, but to earn a conviction they needed direct, incriminating evidence.
Duh.
After the second anniversary of Jamie Paxton's death in 1992, surveillance observed Dillon entering the Times Leader building. He bought a copy of the previous day's paper, full of the details of the Paxton memorial service. The FBI had good circumstantial evidence on Thomas
I
Dillon,
must
but they
have.
still lacked physical evidence, a bullet, a
I hope you
gun,
feel
or
better
a
soon.
to link him with just one of the victims. Hunting season was fast approaching. Dillon was still out roaming the rural roads, drunk, armed, deadly. The communities of southern Ohio had been terrorized for 3 years. The people feared going outside, but tried to live normal lives. Dillon had to be taken off the streets. The task force knew Dillon had been in trouble in the past for illegally owning a silencer and was forbidden to possess firearms, a stipulation he clearly violated during his vandalism sprees. The task force had little choice. Before he could kill again, they would arrest Thomas Dillon. But the plan wasn't just to arrest him on a weapons violation, but to convince him he was caught red-handed and get him to confess to murder. Lacking ballistic evidence and holding only a relatively minor weapons charge on Dillon, the FBI badly needed to elicit a confession. Trumbitis had a plan.
Since we knew what his routine was through the surveillances and that, where he left his residence and he would go to this dairy mart every day before he left and went on his 300-400 mile drives, we would try to make the approach at the dairy mart. And what we had was an office building right across from the dairy mart, where we occupied. We took over the basement of that building. Detective Wilson and I did was we went down into the basement where we were going to conduct the interview, and we put up along the walls of the whole room maps of the areas that he drove in, crime scene photographs, newspaper articles. We wanted to make that setting just irresistible to him.
Then, we're just going to, piece by piece, start laying this out in front of him. See what kind of reaction we get from him.
It would be overwhelming, and it would put him in the best frame of mind for us to be able to sit down and interview him and get a confession.
On November 27th, 1992, the plan went into effect. Their entire case so far rested on getting a confession.
The idea was for when he came out of the Dairy Mart, we were going to approach him, identify ourselves, and basically request that he follow us voluntarily over to this room where we wanted to share some information with him and show him some things that we knew that would interest him.
If Dillon refused, Trumbitis would raise his right hand to signal ATF agents who are responsible for making arrests in weapons cases to cuff Dillon.
And I can just remember his reaction. I mean, his jaw just for about 5 seconds, and then he composed himself and he said, "I want to talk to my attorney first."
That was the cue. Trumbitis gave the signal, and the ATF agents stepped in and arrested Thomas Dillon. Dillon didn't realize it, but it was a bitter defeat for the FBI. Trumbitis thought he'd blown it, despite all the evidence he'd gathered. Despite his certainty that they had the road sniper, he feared that he would see a 5-time murderer quickly released on a minor weapons charge. At the very time of Dillon's arrest, other task force members were executing a search warrant on Dillon's house. Finally, the FBI felt they would come away with the physical evidence desperately needed to link him, once and for all, to the murders. But they didn't. To their surprise, the search turned up nothing more incriminating than some area maps marked with arson and vandalism sites. Dillon was refusing to talk. They were holding him, but there was nothing they could do with him.
It was pretty much over when he said he wanted to talk to his attorney. So we went back to the restaurant and we were going to have a cup of coffee, and all of a sudden we got the word that he wanted to talk to us. And so Walt and I jumped into our car and we made a beeline to Stark County Jail.
Trumbitis and Wilson confronted Dillon with one piece of evidence after another. Photographs, videotapes, newspaper clippings, showing his link to the murders.
I would pull out one piece at a time and show him, and just as we had suspected, he just was keenly interested in the information that we had, the surveillance pictures, the crime scene photos, just the animal, the shots of the animals that we had along the roadways, and that you could just see that he was just fascinated by that.
Fascinated but not talkative, Dillon said it would serve no purpose to admit anything now. Another dead end for the FBI. Dillon's attorney was arguing that he should be spared jail time in the weapons charge. Now, unless something turned up on him very quickly, Thomas Dillon would have to be released. The task force was now fighting the clock. Desperate for physical evidence, they held another press conference, appealing to the public for any information about guns they may have bought or sold with Thomas Dillon.
Haven't had any contact with Mr. Dillon.
Meanwhile, task force member Jerry Wade of the Ohio Division of Wildlife was following up on a tip. A witness steered Wade to a spot where he had seen Thomas Dillon firing his rifle a couple of years back. Wade hoped that would lead him to some ballistic evidence to link Dillon to one of the killers.
This individual brought it to our attention that he'd seen Thomas Lee Dillon shoot this deer with a rifle. Thought the rifle might be one of them that was used. And if we could locate some physical evidence, the shell casings per se, if we could get those and match them to the murder weapon, we could put that rifle in Thomas Lee Dillon's hand prior to the murders, which would really give us a lot stronger case as far as him possessing the rifle prior to the murders.
The chances of finding small shells in such a wide area were slim, and it had been 2 years since the rifle had been fired there. Determined, Wade patiently combed inch by inch through a grassy field where the anonymous witness said he saw Dillon shoot the deer. Beginning at the tree described by the witness, Wade searched the area in a circular pattern by hand and with a metal detector, carefully marking off the territory. Miraculously, Wade hit the jackpot. He found 2 rifle shell casings, later identified as coming from the same gun that killed Gary Bradley and Claude Hawkins. Finally, a physical link to the murders.
I felt like celebrating. It was just unbelievable that I found them, because after the time, the length of time that had been since the shooting and the incident, and the individual wasn't sure the location of the tree exactly. The scene had changed since he had been there. They'd removed a fence row and pushed out the area. So I felt very, very much fortunate to find him, and I felt like a celebration at the time. It was just like, it's a gift handed to you.
Meanwhile, the publicity from the press conference asking the public for help was about to bear fruit. On December 4th, Captain Shryock is manning the phones at Task Force headquarters.
It's installing now.
A man named Al Cope is on the phone. He said he bought a weapon from someone who may have been Thomas Dillon at a gun show the previous spring. The date? April 5th, the same day Gary Bradley was murdered. The rifle was sent to the FBI laboratory in Washington for ballistics testing.
Better check that beef. Maybe
Special Agent Paul Schrecker is a ballistics expert for the FBI.
As the bullet passes down the barrel of the weapon, that bullet, by coming in direct contact with the interior of the barrel of the weapon, picks up the microscopic imperfections, the microscopic features of that barrel. So that bullet is marked
very frisky.
that barrel.
Can smell it. Well, just.
Bullets taken from the bodies of victims Claude Hawkins and Gary Bradley were examined at FBI labs.
A bullet fragment may still be of value for comparison, even though a bullet may fragment, may break up as a result of striking a victim, and maybe only fragments are ever recovered. Those fragments are still marked. They still bear the impressions of the inside of the barrel of the weapon, and those fragments can still be used to make a positive association or an identification. When the weapon was submitted to our laboratory, the weapon was test-fired, and the test-fired bullets from this weapon were then compared to the bullet fragments taken from the
Al Cope's gun was test-fired,
I
and the
will.
bullets examined for characteristics they may have in common with the bullet fragments taken from Gary Bradley and Claude Hawkins. The conclusion? Al Cope's gun, sold to
Yep.
him by Thomas Dillon, matched the gun used to kill both Gary Bradley
I've got to freeze that loaf of bread as well. I've got to freeze that loaf of bread.
Agent Trumbitis visited Dillon in jail and confronted him with the evidence. He and his trial fit the descriptions of a few witnesses. He had been off work when each murder had occurred. He had a history of random
Well, that bit don't go there, because look.
and the FBI could prove in
Some of
court
them are
that the
very
man he once
different.
owned killed at
They're
least 2 of
very,
the
very
victims.
awkward type.
But Trumbitis knew Dillon was guilty of all 5
Like that
murders and
one, or
closure for the victims'
where
families.
is it?
He offered Dillon
That
a
one.
deal.
Yeah, don't put that do with me.
They're odd. They're really weird.
Dillon got nervous and he began to negotiate.
I know. And I am trying to do this.
Thomas Dillon met with the prosecutors in June of 1993. He agreed to admit to 5 killings if the death penalty were dropped as a possible sentence.
Terms, 1 each for each of the acts committed.
On July 9th, Dillon confessed to prosecutors in order to save his life. 12th,
Oh, well,
1994,
well.
a smirking Thomas Dillon walked into the Noble County Courthouse to make his plea.
Mr. Dillon, at this time, how do you plead to count one in the indictment in case number 93 CR4 involving the death of the aggravated murder charge involving the death of Gary Bradley? How do you plead?
With the families of the victims watching, Dillon confessed to murdering Donald Welling, Kevin Loring, Claude Hawkins, Gary Bradley, and Jamie Paxton. He was still smirking and unrepentant as he left court. Dillon's incredibly cavalier attitude was detailed by a local reporter whom Dillon repeatedly called from prison. Marveling at his own violence, reveling in his celebrity, and laughing off the murders. Except one. He would not discuss the murder of Jamie Paxton.
Forget it, all right? Just forget it.
Jean Paxton, Jamie's mother, was in court the day Dillon pleaded guilty.
I just want to talk to him about Jamie, the kind of person Jamie was. Jamie was everything Thomas Dillon could never be. Dillon is a coward. He hid behind a gun, and Jamie was not that way.
Little did I know that on the evening news he was watching that, and it made him very angry that I had called him a pathetic coward.
We talked to him about remorse and how did you feel after these homicides. And the only one that he said that it really bothered him about was Jamie Paxton. He said, I didn't realize the kid was so young.
Jean Paxton had looked forward to confronting Dillon in court, but his guilty plea cost her that opportunity. She asked Sheriff McCourt to arrange a conversation. McCourt agreed. That evening, Jean Paxton's phone rang. She found herself speaking with the murderer of her son.
When I picked up the phone that evening, it was just like somebody calling up to sell me something. He said, Mrs. Paxton, this is Tom Dillon. It was just almost more than I could comprehend. The tone of his voice, the way he came across. Still, the arrogance was there.
Dillon told Jean Paxton that when she called him a coward, she had hurt his feelings.
I really don't think he expected to get what he got from me. I think that Thomas Dillon could have handled the crying, the screaming, the saying of calling names, the cursing. I think he could handle that, but I did not lower myself to that level. I talked to him as a mother, and I really feel that through this whole thing, that is what brought to Thomas Dillon.
After 3 years, Jean Paxton felt vindicated.
I felt really good. I walked out on my front porch, and I just felt like for the first time in 3 years that I was free. I was free of Thomas Dillon. I felt that I had defeated him by words, and I did it all for Jamie.
Thomas Dillon made it clear he did not want to go to Lucasville Prison, the toughest in Ohio. So Jean Paxton saw to it, with a petition drive, that was exactly where Dillon was sent. In August 1993, Jean Paxton won a $25 million wrongful death judgment against any future money Dillon might make. Dillon's wife had been trying to sell his story to Hollywood. Paxton and State Senator Bob Nye passed the Paxton bill, barring killers or their relatives from profiting from the crime. Thomas Dillon remains in Lucasville Prison. He is eligible for parole in 165 years. day began like any other for Cheryl and Paul Chapman until the silence of a peaceful Sunday morning was shattered with a phone call. Cheryl's sister Nancy had not shown up for work, and several attempts to reach her by phone were unsuccessful. The Chapmans, sensing something must be wrong, rushed to her apartment.
Some killers are stealthy, killing with an almost clinical precision. Others act on a violent impulse, saturating the crime scene with their rage. How a murderer behaves tells much about who he is. In 1987, the brutality of a triple homicide in Anchorage tested the mettle of even the most seasoned investigators. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. When Nancy Newman and her 2 young daughters were found slain in their apartment, local law enforcement needed help. They called the FBI. The crime scene clues were everywhere, but seemed to lead nowhere. Agents knew that to crack this case, they need to somehow get inside the killer's mind.
Alaska sits on the edge of the wilderness, seemingly isolated from the rest of the world and its troubles. Its inhabitants are united by the beauty of the landscape and a mutual respect for the self-reliant nature of the community. It was shortly before 8 a.m. on a Sunday, March 15th, 1987. Cheryl and Paul Chapman were awakened by a phone call. Cheryl's sister, Nancy Newman, was hours late for the breakfast shift at the restaurant where she worked. Nancy's shift manager told Cheryl that Nancy's car was in the restaurant parking lot, but Nancy was nowhere in sight. Maybe the Chapmans should check. From the moment Paul and Cheryl arrived at Nancy's apartment, they sensed something was wrong. There was no sign of Nancy. Her 2 daughters, 8-year-old Melissa and 3-year-old Angie, were nowhere in sight. Coffee mugs from Cheryl's Friday night visit with her sister were still in the sink. The remains of breakfast had been left on the table. The tin where Nancy kept her tip money sat empty. And a brown cigarette butt, not a brand Nancy smoked, was in the ashtray.
Nancy? Nancy?
In Nancy's bedroom, Paul made a gruesome discovery. He found Nancy lying beaten and lifeless on her bed. Paul rushed to the other bedrooms to find Nancy's 2 girls. To his horror, he found Melissa and Angie brutally murdered. Within minutes, the first Anchorage police officers arrived at the Newman's apartment. Not wanting to disturb the crime scene, the officers secured the area and tried to calm the distraught family until the crime scene processing unit arrived. What police found was horrific. Nancy and Melissa Newman appeared to have been beaten and strangled. Little Angie Newman's throat was cut so deeply she was almost decapitated. Anchorage police officer Bill Gifford was at the scene.
Well, the impact of a case like this is quite often it's hard to capture in words. We're pretty used to working homicide cases and serious assault cases, and overall I think the community becomes, if not callous, somewhat accustomed to these kind of things happening, just a typical murder. Something of this magnitude, however, people are never prepared for.
The murders were so gruesome that even experienced police officers were shaken.
It is shocking for the public, and it takes a toll on the investigators and the officers working the case as well, because you're just not used to seeing, as I mentioned, things of this magnitude.
Nancy Newman's body was lying on her bed, her nightgown hiked up around her chest. There were abrasions on her nose, chin, and forehead, and a knee seemed to be injured. Bloodstains were at the foot of the bed. A pair of olive green gloves were on top of the dresser. Down the hall, Melissa Newman was found on her back in the middle of her room. A bloody, twisted pillowcase under her neck. Another pillowcase had been used to tie her arms. Three-year-old Angie Newman lay on her bedroom floor in a pool of blood, surrounded by her favorite books. Bloodstain pattern analysis often yields clues. The positions of the victims and killer. The movements of the victims. And the number of blows struck can be reconstructed by an experienced examiner.
In this particular case, it assisted us in establishing a sequence of events.
Stains found on Nancy Newman's bed suggested that she and Melissa had been forced down the hall to her mother's room, where they were assaulted. And stains on the hallway carpeting indicated that Melissa was then returned to her room and killed there. Officers treated each area as a completely separate crime scene. First, they determined the type of physical evidence that was likely to be found, and then the order it should be processed.
How we doing?
Given the horrific nature of this crime and the lack of an obvious suspect, investigators knew that every possible piece of physical evidence was potentially invaluable. Detective Sergeant Michael Grimes was in charge of the Anchorage Police Department's Homicide, Assault, and Robbery Unit.
I knew that they were going to be in this crime scene for hours and hours and hours. This immediately is what we identify as a forensic case. There was very little disturbed by them when they found the body, so we were very fortunate in that respect.
Investigators frequently find evidence in common household dirt. Sometimes hair and fibers buried in carpeting can be traced to a suspect. For thorough coverage, investigators broke each room into quadrants and vacuumed each section. To begin the painstaking task, investigators must first cordon off a 3-foot by 4-foot area of the room. The investigator uses an ordinary vacuum with a special filter attachment. As the debris is pulled off the floor, it travels down a short tube and then goes into a collection pan. There it becomes trapped in clean filter paper. Once a quadrant of the room has been processed, the filter is removed and placed into an evidence container. Many minute hairs and fibers are missed by crime scene vacuumings. Therefore, a portable argon laser is used, which causes unseen hairs and fibers to fluoresce when exposed to the laser's light. A technique called luminol processing was also used to look for traces of blood. If present, the luminol spray will cause the proteins in the blood to fluoresce, making them visible to examiners.
We were processing the scene and looking for invisible traces or invisible blood patterns. We found a luminescent impression that we were able to photograph. We also knew we had a knife missing out of the kitchen. We took one of those knives out of the knife set, and we found that matched in width and length to that of the luminol impression that we had.
The crime scene appearance suggested the murderer had taken the victims by surprise. It appeared that Newman's morning routine was suddenly interrupted, perhaps indicating that they knew the killer. A big question was motive. At the scene, Cheryl told police that Nancy seemed to have no enemies. As a waitress, she was popular among her customers and colleagues, friendly without being flirtatious. And what possible motive could explain the rage inflicted upon 8-year-old Melissa and 3-year-old Angela? Burglary was unlikely. It was obvious to investigators that the apartment had not been ransacked or otherwise disturbed. Investigators struggled to find a solid lead. Detective Bill Reeder worked the case from the beginning.
The initial lead came from the scene itself, that we could find no signs of forced entry. So I kind of leaned us toward looking at people that had access to the apartment or knew the victim.
Immediately the questioning began. Neighbors, family and friends, anyone who may have had information.
What we were looking at was to find someone that had seen anything unusual, any strangers in the area, had heard anything unusual, had seen someone carrying things away, anything at all that would help us focus on someone or somebody.
Family members are almost always suspects early in an investigation. Paul Chapman was no exception. Though he had no one to back up his alibi, which was that he was alone most of Saturday, his reaction to discovering the bodies was clearly one of trauma and loss. Investigators spoke with everyone close to the family and learned that Nancy Newman was happily married to John Newman, the father of their 2 girls. He was a suspect, spouses usually are. But John Newman was in California training to be a locksmith at the time of the murders.
Another way to eliminate a suspect is to watch and continue to talk to him. John never gave us any indication other than he wanted this case solved. He was extremely distraught. Gave all the signs that anybody would give under the circumstances.
Because the Newmans lived in a multi-unit apartment complex, Detective Grimes knew that interviewing neighbors in the immediate area would be a daunting task.
There was an apartment in a multi-unit apartment house, which was in a particular area of town that was surrounded by large multi-unit apartment houses, and we were looking at literally hundreds of dwellings in that area.
The close-knit community of Anchorage was shocked by the brutality of the murders. Police investigators, having no experience with crimes this shocking, were asking the most frightening of all possible questions. Was a serial killer a possibility? Police felt pressured to work quickly.
Well, what kind of person would do this kind of crime? Was there significance in the way that people were murdered that could give us some kind of leads as to who we were looking for, or at least what type of person? And so immediately, I'd say within the first day or so, we were getting some help from the FBI.
Investigators quickly realized they needed help in determining the type of individual responsible for the murders. They turned to the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit at Quantico, Virginia. Special Agent Judd Ray received the call. As a profiler in the unit, Ray's job was to assist investigators in hunting down America's worst killers. To do that, Ray had to understand the workings of a killer's mind.
We were looking at deeds and acts of individuals after it happened and trying to predict the kind of personality, if you will, or composite view of what kind of human being could have done it.
Through detailed evaluations of crime scene photos and police reports, Ray provided investigators with a psychological portrait of the killer.
This is a disorganized crime scene, low self-esteem, all the kind of things that you would say about this kind of person. Society has rejected him through the years, and now it's his time to reject society.
Ray told the Anchorage detectives that they possibly faced a repeat performance.
This particular incident alarmed him so much, particularly with 3 victims at one time, 2 being children, that his opinion also, he said that we need to get something working on this right away, because it appears that this person's out of control, and there's the potential that he's going to be doing it again in the very near future.
From the autopsy reports, investigators learned that Nancy and 8-year-old Melissa Newman had been sexually assaulted. Based on this information and characteristics of the crime, Ray concluded that this violent offender would have a history of sexual assault. He would be a white male, in his early to mid-20s, and underachieving. Following Ray's conclusions, investigators began to narrow the range of possible suspects. Among them was a young man who had recently moved in a few doors down from the Newmans. Police also questioned Kirby Anthony, the 23-year-old nephew of John Newman. Anthony had an alibi in the morning hours of Saturday night 13th, but the neighbor did not.
Tremendous rage that was inflicted on the almost decapitated the young 3-year-old suggested to me that there was nothing in my mind that I had came across that sufficient in his face to justify this kind of rage by a stranger.
Ray's insistence that the killer was known to the victims led investigators to shift focus away from the man who lived nearby. Neighbors and friends of the Newmans confirmed the young man's claim that he had never met Nancy Newman or her children.
Because I talked about familiarity, somebody that's close to the family, somebody that knows her, that had some sort of relationship with her, perhaps not been rejected by her. They said, well, as a matter of fact, there's a nephew that comes
investigators continued questioning possible suspects, the volume of evidence that had been collected from the crime scene was taxing the limits of Alaska's state crime lab. Once again, Anchorage police turned to the FBI. The evidence was sent to the FBI's crime lab in Washington, D.C. Hair and fiber expert Doug Diedrich was given the case. Diedrich began by sorting through the evidence, searching for any link to a suspect. Hairs, fibers, glass particles, soil, paint chips, anything that may have been transferred during the killer's violent contact with his victims.
Make some changes to that.
Fibers are unusually difficult to trace, and because no one knew what the killer was wearing during the murders, there was no basis in which to compare recovered fibers.
The varieties that are out there are endless. So that when an individual in a case, for instance, was wearing a particular type of clothing, transfers fiber material, that evidence will be considered to be unique. Even though they may have made a
Yeah,
number
I've got
of
an
garments
issue
of
with
the
the
same
system.
type, by the time it gets out into the public, it doesn't
It
materially
can't vent the air out fast
drop of
enough.
oil in the ocean.
Mm.
It's there, but it's hard to
Even
find.
though there's 3 fans blowing on the rear
Distinct fibers, amounting to less
and
than
one
a
at the
thimble
top
full of evidence,
exhausting,
were recovered from throughout the Newman's
it's
apartment.
not getting rid of the heat fast enough.
Diedrich's
So they have
expertise
to
of
put
fiber
another fan
transfer,
in it.
however, enabled him to reconstruct the suspect's movements during the crime,
Right, I
giving
am going to
investigators
call
a
it
clearer
now.
picture of
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sort of getting there slowly, but it'll fit in place. So, yes, I managed to find some for the edges of the puzzle, so lots of love to you all. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you guys later. Lots of love. Bye, everybody.